Hi, I'm Carol Alt, and today we are in lovely downtown New York City. Well, it was very rare at that point to get jobs that were 10 days long. I mean, my jobs were, 2 days catalog in Jamaica, go shoot Louis Ferrand in Paris for 3 days, shoot Lancôme for 2 days. So wherever I went, you had no connection to, because you would land, they'd pick you up from the airport, they would take you straight to a studio, you'd work till 7 or 8 at night, because on location, the agency had no control over really how much you worked. And it was very hard, or at least it was for me, to tell a client, I'm sorry, I'm not working longer than 8 hours. They fly you to Paris, and they put you in a beautiful hotel, and they pay you. At that point, I was being paid $5,000 a day, which was an enormous amount of money in 1980. I mean, it was enormous. It was like getting paid $500,000 today. I mean, most of the girls were making, $1,000, maybe $1,200. So I was making almost 5 times the average model. So I didn't feel I had any right to say to them, oh, I'm not working until 8 o'clock tonight. I mean, at some point, you'd start to feign fainting, and they'd say, okay, let's finish this up tomorrow. But it was hard. It was a hard time in terms of it was a change. It was a change in the time of modeling, and we were right at the forefront at that moment. And John Casablancas, as I had said previously, was a huge part of this change that was happening in the modeling industry, where the prices were being driven up. And along with the prices came, huge expectations of what, the girls should do for one day, for one day's work. And I never, as part of my business plan, I never charged overtime, ever. So, they could get an extra 3 hours out of me basically for free. But, I felt that they were my clients, especially clients who kept coming back and coming back, like Louis Ferrand, or like Lancôme, or like Albert Nippon at the time, or Danskin, or Versace, or Valentino. I mean, I worked for those people without charging overtime. They were good clients, they always came back. It was very rare back then not to charge overtime. It was basically part of the protocol. I mean, I remember being in studios with sometimes 5 other girls. We'd be shooting an ad or whatever, and we'd work till 5:30, and the girls would come in with their vouchers till 9 to 5, and then 5 to 5:30. And I just couldn't be bothered doing that to a client who kept coming back. And believe me, I was in studios, and I was in studios when they let the other girls go after 5 o'clock, and they asked me to stay to do the extra shot because they knew they weren't going to be charged. But also at the same time, I was in studios when I heard them say, I can't believe that girl charged us for 20 minutes overtime on a prorated basis. I heard clients. I mean, the biggest thing, I have to say, the biggest advantage I had in my career has been that I've listened. I did it on The Celebrity Apprentice. I listened to Donald. I've done it throughout my career. I listen to people, and I hear what they say. So I have a client who's saying that they're upset that another girl charged for 20 minutes overtime. You think in your right mind I'm going to charge 20 minutes overtime? Not at all. Not for a client who keeps coming back. Absolutely not. My contract with Lancôme happened 6 months into my career, so yes, it was my first contract. And I brought them to #1 for the 4 years that I worked with them. And then they decided that they wanted a famous name, so they took Isabella Rossellini worldwide. And CoverGirl picked me up 2 days before my contract was actually over with Lancôme. So I was already signed with CoverGirl by the time Lancôme went with Isabella Rossellini. And Lancôme fell to #3, and then CoverGirl went to #1. And then CoverGirl in 1990 decided not to renew my option, and then they fell to #2 to Maybelline. So I've had a very good track record. I'm very proud of that. The modeling industry has gone through incarnations. I mean, there were the girls in the very beginning, Carmen, who's still working today. You had the Susie Blakeleys, the Twiggies in the 60s. There were a few models. the industry continued to expand like this. I mean, it started from a finite point and it's just gone out infinitely. I mean, there was a point in the 80s where every waitress, every messenger on a bike was a model of some sort, you know. What happened is that, you know, and you've got to give a nod to the girls who even came before me, because there were innovations even before me. I mean, Lauren Hutton, first girl ever to get a contract for cosmetics and demanded it. Cheryl Tiegs, her husband was a marketing whiz. Some of the things that they did for Cheryl Tiegs' career had never been done before that. I mean, that poster where you could see through the fishnet, I mean, classy and sexy all at the same time. You know, so there was things that were happening in the industry slowly. By the time I came up, you know, they had girls were selling products through calendars and through posters, and you know, there were contracts for cosmetics, and you know, the agency structure had changed, and the girls were working full time, and they were literally models as a career. Not, oh, I'm a real estate agent on the side, I model. So it was an innovative time. By the time, and by the way, this was also a time when people would write into JCPenney's and say, the two girls on page 10, you know, one girl has a hand on the other girl's shoulder. Are they lesbians? Why are they touching? It was a very puritanical time. I mean, they didn't want girls touching, and by the end of the 80s, it was a radical change. You had that beautiful poster of the 5 supermodels on the street naked, and it was a classic. Something like that in the time that I had come up in modeling would have been the end of a career. I remember Janice Dickinson crawling on all fours, totally naked, for Italian Bazaar with, Italian Bazaar or Italian Vogue, with, you know, shoes on her hands and on her feet, and you know, Monique had a headache. She, oh my God, we have to stop Janice from doing this. Oh my God, you know, she's going to ruin her career. I remember when Paulina did a nude spread for GQ with Jeff Aquilon. And I said, Monique, you have to tell her, she doesn't have to do those things if she doesn't want to. You have to protect her. She's so young. You know, I was so worried for Paulina. I remember when Stephanie Seymour, I was in 1986, we did a shoot for Bazaar. And she was naked with just a belt wrapped around her. And I said, Stephanie, you don't have to do that. You know, I don't care. You know, you know, so, you know, where I was coming from was a time where it was very puritanical in the industry, and you didn't do those kind of things. That was the kiss of death for a career. And I was talking to girls who were coming up in a different time, who were basically, you know, in a much more free-flowing time, and they, you know, nudity didn't matter, and in fact, it enhanced their career and moved them forward much more quickly. You know, little did I know. And then, you know, the models of the late 80s, like, you know, Cindy Crawford, who had been working for a very long time before she made it, you know, all of a sudden, Playboy, Richard Gere, and MTV happened all at the same time. Now, I had been doing the House of Style with Jane Pittman as Fashion Avenue, but we didn't have an outlet for it. And all of a sudden, Jane Pittman's husband was running MTV. They put the House of Style on. I was doing a movie. I wasn't available. They hired Cindy Crawford, and she had basically a perfect storm. She had those 3 things hit at once and created who Cindy Crawford is today. And that happened at the late 80s. So coming from a very, very puritanical time where girls weren't even allowed to touch on page 10 of the JCPenney's catalog, to a time where Playboy was enhancing somebody's career, you know, and that was just in a matter of 7 years. So by the time the late 80s rolled around, the girls who were coming up, Linda Evangelista, you know, Christy Turlington, Cindy Crawford, I mean, they got there. They were able to do that because of us. And we were able to do what we did because of the Cheryl Tiegs and the Christy Brinkley's and the, you know, Lauren Huttons of the world, and Lauren Hutton et al. Were able to do that because of the girls that came before them. So this is a business that has been built on history. It's not like a new generation comes in and you go back to square one. It's a new generation comes in and you continue from where this was left off. So, you know, then the 90s came around, and that fashion show that I did because I was overexposed and got $700 for, I was now offered $50,000 a show by both Foray and Valentino. And I had to say no to both because I couldn't say one to yes over the other, even if I had a favorite, and I couldn't say yes to both. So I ended up saying no to both because I was shooting a movie was the excuse, but it was because I couldn't be in one show and not be in the other, but you couldn't be in both. And they were looking for testimonials, and shows were a big thing, and you come down the Spanish Steps, and you were now in huge they were looking for huge auditoriums to have these shows. And then of course Bryant Park came in, and shows became the basis to start a girl's career. Even if you have a great girl, you book her in some shows and get her in front of the editors who are sitting front row, and a girl's career could be made. So the evolution of going from where there was only magazines and and catalog, and there was no contracts, and then all of a sudden there was contracts and catalogs, and the contracts were only for cosmetics, to a time when girls were we were looking to do other things like posters and calendars and exercise videos, and to a point where in the 90s they were doing contracts with girls just to represent a designer clothing for a season. So in essence, for the girls, it's getting better and better and better and better. And I think really what happened is we hit 2000 and the designers went, okay, enough. This is getting too much. We're creating these girls and then they're charging us more money. And we're creating the monster that's eating our profits. So it has, since about 2002, I would say, started to dwindle away. The shows were no longer what the shows were. I remember in Europe, when you'd go to a show, you'd have to battle through the throngs, and then there'd be a phalanx of photographers. I remember taking my boyfriend to the first Versace show. I think he stood in front of the photographers like, there were so many flashes going on. He was like, oh my God. He's like, it was exhilarating. It was adrenaline pumping. It was unbelievable when a person came onto the carpet who was somebody. The flashes went, and there were stars in the front rows, and there were stars on the runways, and the designer was almost ancillary at that point. And in reality, the designers were making it all happen, but the celebrities and the models were what was driving it. And then basically the designers just decided to start using, on the front covers of all the magazines, it's basically only celebrities. So you need to be a celebrity in your own right or in another arena in order to get a cover of a magazine. It's very, very rare, and in fact the cover of Vogue has 3 models on it, 3 girls. I guess they're supermodels, but I'm not following that much of the industry in terms of who's who to know their faces really well. But they have that's the first cover I've seen in at least 3 or 4 years where there was just a model.